What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Transcendence podcast. I'm G.O.D.
And I'm Ray.
And we're your hosts. Take a journey with us into the realms of some of humanity's most inner thoughts and theories about what lies before us and beyond the other side. Take a step back with us from the day-to-day heavy burdens of this constant evolving life. From awakening the collective, astrology, the spiritual divine, holistic health, shamanism, and quantum theory, to the frequencies and vibrations of our universe, history, religion, numerology, and so much more.
We spend countless hours researching to bring you the breakdown of information from some of the greatest minds in these fields and even our own experiences. We're here to challenge your thoughts so that you can reshape your own minds and beliefs into ones that better serve you.
We hope you enjoy the discussions about the supernatural and the ancient knowledge that we have become so fond of, and we wish to share with you so that it may also help you on your quest in this human experience we're living. Let the transcendence begin. Godspeed and share on.
Welcome back.
Hello.
So, last episode we talked about the age of Aquarius, summing up the discussion on the traveling through the ages and why they were so significant, where we began at the beginning of all this journey of, symbols, beliefs, the coming up of using those things as tools, and how how humans have used them throughout time. So now we come to a point where we've explained the characteristics and the summation of all of the ages. So on this episode, we talk about quantum physics and how astrology becomes a reality through scientific explanation. We're going to break down how we can explain to you the effect that astrology does have on us humans on Earth, and also the way that quantum physics and how weird and odd that the science of that is makes it work. So we're going to get into that and give you a nice breakdown. So astrology is a study in the correlation that planetary patterns have causal relationships to the events on Earth. So we're using cycles and planets and their placements to look at this clock, and this clock is giving us basically a characteristic and formation of what's going on now in the universe.
Yeah, and that's a key thing to really make sure you're aware of, because it goes a lot deeper than just the basic premise that these heavenly bodies have influence or are correlated with earthly events. It goes a little bit deeper than that. It's not so basic.
Right. So, as above, so below, a famous saying used through the ages. As within, so without. It would make sense because, as the story's being told up in the sky, we're experiencing these things here on Earth. So, astrology entails that all living organisms on Earth are affected by and a part of a larger cosmic fabric. So how do we prove this? Well, we have to go into quantum physics. What does quantum physics say? So it's a very odd thing to say that basically the Maya or illusion of this reality we live in is that the wave and the particle are the same thing. So when scientists are observing something, it shows up as a particle. This is called the observer effect, where they did a bunch of studies and they were trying to calculate how particles maneuvered and, the activity on a subatomic level. And through these, they realized that the particle would act as a wave when not being observed. Mm-hmm. So it's like the more we know about where an electron is, the less we know about where it's going. The more we know about something's mass, the less we know about its trajectory. We can know the electron as a particle, or we can know the electron as a wave. But the more we know about the electron as the particle, the less we know it as a wave. And a famous quote from Niels Bohr, he was the father of quantum physics, the guy that brought it to life. And he said it's not stranger than we think, but it's stranger than we can think. And quantum theory changed this measurable mechanical universe into a web of intelligence. And in this environment, astrology makes sense. In this environment of communication, of information that isn't just about seeing things, all of a sudden, astrology fits into a scientific paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like even for astrologers, like, you know, some expectations that are generated by astrology are so general, a lot of what most people who aren't familiar with astrology, that it's just very general, that any outcome can be interpreted as fitting the expectation. I know that's a huge argument from a lot of deniers of astrology, but some have used astrology to generate very specific expectations, and they can be verified against outcomes in the natural world. Because honestly, when you take astrology, it's widely correlated with statistics. You know, you think about science. Science is the recording and gathering of data over time, and then making comparisons through data and performing experiments by comparing and contrasting against that data.
Right, and they're using the physical world as a measurement of that.
Mm-hmm.
Where it gets a little funky in quantum physics because it's not about measuring the physical world.
Yeah. So like if you just kind of break it down, astrology and statistics, we would all say that statistics also, collects and evaluates observable facts for drawing inferences based on probability. It infers the properties of a population by analyzing the properties of a data sample drawn from that population, like I was just saying. So concerned with the precision and reliability of inferences, it helps to draw that. Astrology can be viewed from context of statistical time series analysis because every part of astrology can be viewed as a division of time. It's honestly the earliest measure of time before we even had time systems. So that's where the kind of proof is in the pudding right there.
Right. And there was a lot of cool studies more back in I think it was in the 80s and the 90s. You had the Mars effect, and you had, plenty other different things, which we'll talk about. But, and that's the physical manifestation of proving these things correctly. Because when numbers repeat and when things repeat, don't we all go by statistics? And in some circumstances, maybe it's a little different. And this is where I respect Bill Burr, because he had said, statistics can be really fucking stupid too, because, most shark attacks happen near the shore. Yeah. Well, fucking course they do.
Sharks live in the water.
Right. So statistics can also be played with. So there is a way to be discerning towards these statistics. But when it comes down to astrology and it comes down to things that they've measured over time and these studies, it does show significance to where it's not really a biased study. And a lot of people didn't like this. Yeah. They thought it was cuckoo.
Exactly. Like that's true though, because, when it comes to data, the outcome of the data that you're putting in is what the answer is. It's, because numbers don't lie. So, if you're putting in certain numbers or you're putting in certain calculations and projections and stuff like that, you can get whatever you really want, basically.
Right.
But this goes a little bit further than that. And like something I was like, so when I was saying about the whole fact of like that comparative data and everything and stuff, an example that was, that I want to give you, it was done by a researcher named Kevin B. Burke. And in a study based off of Mercury seasonal influences, so that's, a pattern of Mercury during its, whatever seasons. He did a study based off of that. If there were any federal civil appeals during that Mercury season, none were found, and it had no influence. But then he also took data from flight on-time performance and Mercury in those seasons, and he showed that there was a strong and significant influence over that. So how does that come into play then? Well, if you think about it from the astrological standpoint, Mercury is supposed to be in defining communication, travel, commerce, all that. So it's pretty interesting how something like federal civil appeals, which doesn't really have to do with any mercurial energy, but on-time flight patterns does. And when comparing in those two seasons, there was significant data with the whole flight pattern thing, since Mercury has to do with travel and commerce and commuting and all that. So he found the statistic likeliness from 1.8 million flights during a mercurial season influence. So on-time flight performance was significant and very likely during those mercurial seasons.
Right.
So that's kind of like how the data is used to kind of prove or disprove things. And that's done with all sorts of things, not just obviously astrology and stuff, but that's just an example to kind of get a gist of it.
Right. And point bringing up, that, scientific measurements can be skewed. It can be. And there was actually a bit of manipulation and corruption in one of the, that's why I brought up the Mars effect.
Yeah.
Because in that specific study, there was a few scientists and people that didn't like the fact that they were, coming up with some pretty positive results on these astrological studies. Once again, they don't want to believe in things they can't see. They wanted it to be cuckoo. I mean, I think a lot of people want to, know the truth about things, but they also don't want their own belief systems to be interrupted. So they're going to come with a lot of people do this, is that they've already chosen something. They're somewhat of a biased and concrete set of beliefs that's built into them. And they're going to take that and actually come from their paradigm, not realizing that they're defending their paradigm and not allowing the new scientific information to end in a result to change that paradigm.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, that's the thing. So, like, we say about cycles and time, and we always say that, like, astrology is like these cosmic clocks and stuff. So, it kind of goes off the premise that astrology doesn't correlate with direct influence from planets, but rather their cycles. So like saying a statement like this planet caused this, that can't really be supported with scientific, data and stuff. But instead saying this event is statistically more likely during this season cycle or pattern defined by the position of this or these planets, that can be supported. You think about its original uses, astrology, it's medical diagnosis, political guidance, probability, and question answering. But yeah, like you were saying, there's a lot of researchers that went out to do this and a lot of people that were denied. And one of the first big, well-known scientists to really kind of explore astrology and the human psyche was Carl Jung.
Our big bad boy, Mr.
He's
Jung,
the pioneer of psychology.
Yes, he is. He's the daddy.
Exactly. So, but here's the thing: he was actually very skeptical of astrological influence with the human psyche, but he was open-minded to, because as a scientist, you have to be ready to be proven wrong.
Right. My point with the whole paradigm thing is like, to be a scientist, you're actually also stating yourself to be very unbiased, and you're not coming from a place of I'm trying to prove what I think is right.
You're not supposed to settle.
No. You're supposed to take these studies and all of these things and take them serious and be honest with yourself, and that's where a lot of scientists, politicians, medical studies, and all this other stuff, like, I mean, don't just throw this in here real quick. Big pharma, if there's something that they want to prove to be this or that, and it will help their profits, they will. That's business. Same thing with scientists. If they're going to gain a profit, money runs the world. And this has to change if we want to progress as a civilization,
Yeah. So, so some of the stuff that he did, because he was like the first to really produce really vigorous scientific research on the whole astrology. So one of the things he did was he contacted astrologers from 4 different countries, and he got astrology readings from married couples. And they were made from over several years. So the exact numbers were 483 married couples. So that's 966 charts that he went through to do this experiment. He conducted statistical analysis of the charts and found that 936 out of the 966 had extremely large proportions of same contacts between the sun, the moon, their Mars, and Venus. And all of these planets are correlated with marriage and romantic relationships, when those, link up for each other. So that was one thing. So then after doing that, he contacted Marcus Pfizer, a quantum physics pioneer, and had him calculate the odds of this. And the odds were 10 million to 1 chance. So it wasn't just some random thing. So it's a 96.8 correlation of indication of marriage. Jung did the experiment many times, and he got the same successful results every time he did it, because you have to keep trying to back it up. Also, all the details of this are in his book, Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche. So if you ever want to see more into it, you could check out that book. Great
book. And and synchronicity too.
Yeah.
Carry on.
He also, another thing, the terms introvert and extrovert were excelled by Jung. So he also studied the sun signs of 917 men and 1,407 women. So that's 2,342 people. He found introverts were the even number signs and extroverts were the odd number signs. He did 2 studies to show this connection, one in the Journal of Social Psychology and the Journal of Psyche Interdisciplinary and Applied. So you can find those in his work there. He also found the same results with 190 students. He also found that water signs to be more irrationally emotional according to the statistics.
Ooh, can vouch for that one.
See? Yeah. I got a Pisces moon. I could know.
Cancer moon.
Yeah. My emotions are very, very dreamy.
Oh, yeah. And as Cancer can be very reactive. And if you, like the hardened shell of a crab, and if you hit that right spot on that soft inside, man, I become a fucking bitch.
You're going to get pinched.
Yeah. And also, by the way, relating to relationships, I've dated water signs. I've dated fire and air. And let me tell you something, man. They're a handful. I don't even think that does it. That doesn't even pay any justice to what they really are, but doesn't make them bad or anything like that. It's just, he's saying that these things come with some sort of characteristics, and this is proven. This is seen.
Yeah. Exactly. Another thing while we're at it that he did, he conducted serial killer studies and the correlation with the signs for sociopaths and tendencies with moon positions, 12th house placements, Pluto, and mutable signs. Got positive results with exact correlations for those.
Yeah. This is a scientist and psychologist.
And that's how it's appropriately supposed to be done. And this is Carl Jung, mind you.
Yeah, you can look his. If you haven't heard his name, you might have been living under a rock.
Yeah.
Or, it's just that you're not crazy into this stuff. But basically, he's like the Einstein, or like the, he's like Donald Trump of psychology. You got to know who he is. You
hear Sigmund
not
Freud.
As bad example.
Yeah. You hear Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Like, honestly, you talk to any psychologist or anybody who's studied in psychology, they'll tell you, especially women, I don't mean that in a bad way either. I mean, women who are in women's studies, they know that Sigmund Freud was a little messed up in the head.
Yeah.
Carl Jung, though, had a lot of the same theories and experimentations and studied the same stuff that Sigmund Freud did.
A little more grounded.
But he did it a lot more grounded and really more thorough and had less of the chaos in his life like that.
Right.
So... but yeah, and then also, you see how he did those experiments with moon placements. Moon in psychology, you have Hippocrates, who also did a lot of studying on the moon. And think about it: moon, lunar, lunacy. Studies have shown full moons and moon cycles to influence psychological effects. And when they did the study, they did it originally about a full moon. So they're looking at the full moon over and seeing, checking on, police reports of arrests and stuff, like anything that's was real crazy over a 3-day span. Now, the numbers that they were getting in from that 3-day span were so erratic and not condensed and being oh, okay, look, a lot of this stuff happened over this much time. But that was a 3-day period. We know the moon to go through cycles in how long?
2.5. Well, 2.5 days per
Yeah,
per sign.
exactly. But like that's 2.5 days per sign. But when it comes
and
to
a full moon would be 2.5 days.
yeah, so exactly. But when they looked at it in more of a 24-hour window, there they found that it was more affected versus the 3-day effect. So conflicting evidence, but there was conflicting mythology as well when they applied it. So the mythology of which you do these studies, is important.
Right. And when you think astrology, you think of not just the planets and their names, but you think of a rich mythology, and that's the whole way of reading it. You're using more of an intuitive approach. We're using these signs and symbols that we've learned, and then we get to break them down in our own fashion. There is a home base for that, but there's also, like to every astrologer, their more intuitive approach. But regardless, these numbers show up. They prove some sort of significance, and too much of a significance to ignore. And how could this all fit? So we have some studies, and we have some more to bring up, but we'll say right here, how can this all really be a thing? How could this all happen? Goes back to the beginning, where quantum theory, it changed this measurable mechanical universe into a web of intelligence, and it makes astrology, it fits astrology right in. It makes sense. And so let's get more on the physical level here, that our sensory organs, right? All of our sensory organs, this is our personal experience. It perceives through vibrations. Hearing music and seeing colors are a result of processing electromagnetic radiation. And the visible spectrum, by the way, is a narrow slit. There's a large band of frequencies. Some assume infinitely. So everything has a vibration. Everything is the word, as the Bible said. And so you have something like, say, ultraviolet, which is a higher frequency than violet. We can't see it. It's higher than violet, but it's there. And now we can measure it. Same thing with infrared. It's a lower frequency than red. Can be seen by reptiles, now in scientific studies as well. We have thermal scopes and all that. And in the same realm, you have radio waves, short waves, power wave distribution, which are like power outlets. So basically what I'm trying to say is everything's measurable on that frequency band. Everything has its own band. So as ultraviolet can go as fast as gamma radiation, these waves are so high in frequency that they could pass through the Earth with no acknowledgement of anything solid, preventing its passing. Planet waves are not separate from the electromagnetic spectrum. Science has become so good with instrumenting electromagnetic radiation, because everything is electrical and magnetic, but only in high enough frequencies to get repetitive signals, though. So with the problem here, with instrumenting anything from a planet, like a Saturn wave, that instead of happening in gigahertz, megahertz, or kilohertz, it's happening 3 cycles per century. We talk about the moon, you say. The moon is 13 cycles per year, around. And what's ironic is it moves through 12 signs. So the way you're going to measure a cycle is through its transits. So how do we get the question is, how do we get a device that will tell us, what the measurement is of a Saturn wave or a moon wave? And who knows, maybe sometime in the future it will. But we do know that in the world of quantum physics, the fact that everything has a frequency, everything has a measurement, everything has vibration, that planets will also have that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about it too. They have, I don't know if you've ever heard like they did like the sounds of the frequency sounds of like the planets and what sounds they made and stuff. And, you think about it, since you're talking about waveforms, like that is a waveform. Right. So it is giving off, it is giving off some type of energy. And now think about it on a bigger scale of their actual cycles and their movements and everything and stuff like that, how that interacts with all the other energy around those planets and then the Earth too on top of it.
And right. And you know what? We're so small, right? We're so tiny compared to, say, if you ever looked at a comparison from Saturn, say, to Earth, you could say, man, how could it be so far away and affect me here? Well, one, it's gigantic, moving at a crazy speed, spinning on its rotation, and we could hear the sound of it too.
Yeah.
But also, this goes back to the web of quantum physics, that everything is interconnected.
Yeah. Space is not actually empty.
No, not at
That
all.
empty space is not actually empty space.
Stuff like dark matter.
Yeah.
It's proven now that we basically live in a web. Look up the picture when you guys get the chance. Google brain and universe, and there's a picture of like now they've measured the dark matter or whatever that is in that picture.
Yeah.
Right, dark
like
matter.
the gray matter in the brain and everything.
Right.
So like, just like you were saying before, as above, so below, as within, so without.
Right.
So same thing that's, up there, that empty space where we think that the brain may contain empty space between our neurons and stuff. But we've scientifically have seen that there's not actually empty space, that there's stuff like gray matter and I think even dark matter in the brain too.
Right.
And we found that there's the same in space as well. So it shows that interconnection between everything as well.
Sure. And it starts to make it all really make sense because now what we're talking about is the universe has a mechanism, it has its own math, and as above, meaning on the biggest, largest scale, things are working basically the same exact way. So some could say that we are in the big brain of a being. You could kind of see it that way.
I believe that.
And because in a holographic universe, which we've discovered that it is, which, by the way, there's a CIA document. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but there's a CIA document that they have affirmed a holographic universe. But, where it becomes a dilemma. It becomes a dilemma because if we look at planets, we see the objects. They're big blocks of rock. They're mass physical objects. But planets are big particles, basically, because we're talking about big and large, right? And big and small.
Well,
but they're waves.
Well, you think about the vastness of just space in the universe. So, yeah.
Right. And at the microcosm, quantum physics has us believing that microscopic subatomic particles are both at once particles and waves. The particle wave duality. We live in a world or a universe of duality. But so on the microscopic level, planets in their own macro quantum universe are both particle and wave. So we have the web, right? We have the web of all things. We have the big brain of God or the universe, whatever you want to call it. You have little subatomic particles, but they show up as waves. Planet, particle, also a wave. So, and it's ironic too, you think of like, a neutron and electrons and they're all spinning around each other. We live in a gigantic
basically
neutron,
a giant atom.
It's the same atom. It's the same exact thing. So this really introduces
is it really giant though?
That's the paradox. A huge paradox because it's really only from perspective.
Yeah.
Only from perspective are these things big, only from our perspective. But, and this all really does, it's not just a three-dimensional reality, it's a fourth dimensional. This is also proven in that CIA document that time that's the fourth dimension, time. It can go front, it can go back, it can go left, it can go right.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a pretty good episode on the function of that and, manifestation and how we potentially could be jumping parallel realities.
Yeah. Time, not linear time, but then also more of the infinite time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So everything's happening in the now, everything's here, everything's already created. So Einstein, he has a famous equation, E equals mc squared. It shows clearly that mass becomes light, becomes mass, becomes light, becomes mass, becomes light. This is an endless dance. And it is through time, but time is tied up to the speed of light because as we approach the speed of light, time becomes infinitely slow. Here we get the paradox of time and space all being mixed in. Time stops at the speed of light. So now we look at astrology as a way of understanding how we perceive in this moment as now as just one piece of an ongoing, unfolding series of planetary cycles, like Gio said. And we actually use the mapping techniques of astrology, which astrologers would call what? A horoscope. Let's break that down. Scope. What does scope mean?
Scope.
To see.
Yeah.
Right? It allows us to see something. Horus, hour. Allows us to see the hour. So, and just like a telescope, allows us to see far away. Telescope, like telephone, you're calling someone far away. Telescope, you're seeing something far away. A microscope allows us to see or scope something small or micro. So astrologers have a technology that allow them to unfold this understanding of this very moment, and possible through quantum physics and time and cycles and measurements. And this is with the respect to a larger perception of time, whether we do it in events or individuals' lives. So, yeah, it's amazing stuff. And I've always really we've done our homework for a long time now, and people always wonder, how could it be possible? Well, the moon affects the tides, Sirius is light years away. Some crazy measurement. It's affected the spin of our planet. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely worth it to really explore and to go deeper, because there's always good information just like that's out there and just so like pass by on the constant. There's a lot of stuff that, when you use that little bit of critical thinking and you keep that open mind, that you could kind of get that wow factor and be like, wow, there's a lot more to everything in our existence when you really try to take a stand back look at things, but also come from a place of intuition and feeling as well, and also unknowing.
Right. Well, and open-mindedness and knowing that we know jack shit, basically. And not that we don't know things, but we make assumptions that we've already figured it out. People already assume. And this is, with me, it's always been the question of why I never submitted to, say, just a religion or just a belief system or anything else. I'm open to anything. And I really recommend to every person to do that, because one, life becomes way more interesting again. It becomes way more interesting. And then that's how the universe opens up doors for you, is when you start asking the right questions, and not for nothing, man. I just have always had an intuitive thing. So I do recall that we didn't get through every study. So, and I want Gio to give a few more examples of some more things being, discovered over time through these studies.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Mars effect, and since we're talking about how there's these influences, not so necessarily just from the actual planets themselves, but their cycles. There was a French scientist and statistician and psychologist in the 1950s who sought to disprove astrology, and his name was Dr. Michel Gacquelin. He was first to apply rigorous statistical methodology to astrological research. The Mars effect it's in his book Cosmic Influences of Human Behavior, and it is his most well-known work. Look it up if you want to go further into it as well. But to give you the gist of it, he evaluated a data set of natal charts of professional athletes and determined whether the tendencies of Mars to be either rising or culminating in these charts. He found the Mars placements were not random and therefore statistically significant. This was considered very valid, and it demonstrates a lot of likeliness between the whole Mars placements. And in the study, it shows you exactly what kind of Mars placements and who had those Mars placements and during those Mars seasons, and how all similar actors or athletes had the same qualities. When all those different Mars placements, so some who had Mars, in, let's just say,
the first house.
Yeah, the first house. You had a bunch of people that were very similar, a bunch of athletes that were very similar in so many ways, even in just their personal lives, that also had Mars in the first house.
And those who were not adept into astrology, when you go through the houses, you go through areas of life. And your first house sign and planets that are in that house in the measurements of the chart, it's the house of self and the house of your personal behavior and what you're going to come off like.
Yeah. And also him being a statistician, he the chances of this were 5 million to 1 chance. Come on, that's not random. I don't believe there's anything random.
If you guys saw it on paper.
Yeah.
what 5 million to 1 looks like.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I can't. And the fact that there were so many confirmed, validating, data showing this. It's not just like random or like, oh, it just happened by chance. Like, no, that's 5 million to 1. That's crazy. But the thing was, the Mars effect was actually replicated by by skeptic groups, one being the Belgian Committee for the Critical Analysis of Parasciences. They were actually successful in doing this, and they got the same results that Gatlin got. But the thing was, they were embarrassed by the results, and they actually withheld the information for 8 years. Then after it was released and stuff, it kind of already got flack, and like Dr. Gatlin already got a lot of flack from other different groups. One of them being a skeptic science group called CSICOP, CSICOP. They did a study and said they couldn't replicate at all what Dr. Gatlin did with the Mars effect, but was later disproven by a CSICOP member themselves. The senior member, Dennis Rollins, he had left the organization and wrote an article exposing the cover-up, saying they bungled their major investigation, falsified results, covered up errors, and fired colleagues who threatened to expose the truth. And that's like what we were saying before. Like, why would they do that? Well, you have some scientists that, not all scientists, but you have some people, think about it in just other people, like how their egos get involved and they want to be right. And they also, if they're biased towards something like astrology and they find that, oh shit, actual science worked and it's kind of proving that this is real, it kind of discredits me a little bit. But you know what though? The science and the truth is bigger than oneself of being right.
Right. And this is where I mentioned profit before. And so if there's a scientific paradigm and certain scientists are making money based off of, doing certain studies or this and that. Now, if astrology, quantum physics, all these statistics he's mentioning, if that affects that paradigm and it affects their pocket, not to say that they're completely evil, but they're going to go against it because now you're affecting their personal life and their money and their profits. It goes right in line with big pharma and politicians. Exactly. They're going to get you to believe things because they want to keep their place in power. And this is human nature. It's nothing that's secret. Yeah. This is human psychology here. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure we all know people in our lives, or we've watched celebrities or politicians or even pharmaceutical companies, which, by the way, Kobe Bryant, before he died, was in an argument with a big pharmaceutical company before his helicopter crashed. But I just mentioned, and we'll talk about that another time. Yeah. But just saying, they'll go that far. Potentially could have been... Could have.
I mean, come on. Kennedy was shot, and we know what he was doing and everything, and what he was trying to unify in the same time as well as Martin Luther King. I know that's a story for a whole nother day, but there's enough to show that some messed up things have happened to people who have tried to interfere with some big powers,
certain things, right? And what's funny is conspiracy was not a word until I think 1968, and you know who invented it? Yep. The CIA. Yep. The CIA made that word up, and it's funny when you look up predictive programming and subliminal messaging and stuff like that, we take it as a joke, or when we hear the word conspiracy, we cringe. But that was the intention. The intention behind it is look, they can put things in movies and they could put things on TV, and if they could put things in religions, and if they could put things in a information bank available to the public, they could get you to think in a specific way, and the person that actually questions things, say even these scientists are doing these studies, you're going to be ridiculed and you're going to be looked at as like a crazy person because you're affecting their paradigm, you're affecting their profit, you're affecting their lives. So they're going to put themselves before you, and once again, human nature.
Yeah. So that whole thing with psychops and Dr. Gatlin and them, these skeptic science groups trying to test out this theory, the scandal became known as the Gatlin affair, and it was found that psychop studies found the same thing Gatlin studies found, but skeptics nowadays try to use the misuse of psychops tests to disprove the Mars effect, and they do that through the Zelen test, which the Zelen was basically the reporting of psychops doing the doing the experiment and not getting the results that Gacklin got. And they put out this whole big thing, basically spreading disinformation. And the Zelen is like was very like well respected and known in the scientific community. So they put that out saying like, oh, like, no, Psychops tried to do it and couldn't replicate it. And this is why Dr. Gacklin, his study is phony and is not scientific. And that stuck for a while. And now, because that's stuck, and a lot of times, you know, this whole Gacklin thing and his studies kind of get pushed off to the side and swept under the rug, you know, people still, skeptics now try to use that whole Zelen test and their reporting on it to be like, no, look, no, they, you know, it was disproven. It is disproven. Well, if you think that people didn't have some sort of affairs involved in things and money, and that they, you know, that they wouldn't do that, they wouldn't try to cover up something, then you are very naive. Very naive.
Exactly. And it's not like people shouldn't feel stupid if they were played. You know, it happens to us all the time. And the idea behind it all is if you approach these things with an open mind, and we keep like our beliefs out of this, and we just understand that, you know, to make new discoveries, we have to become detached, which, by the way, is a very Aquarian thing, is to become detached from your belief systems and, you know, suspend it, you know, like suspend your belief system. And we're not asking, or no one's asking people to actually, you know, if you want to have faith in a belief and you think, you know, and it's your opinion, you know, you go by it. And if it makes you a better person, but when it comes down to facts that could potentially change the world and can change all scientific paradigms, we must follow it if we want to evolve. If we don't want to evolve, you know, we keep following our false prophets and politicians and pharmaceutical companies and scientists and stuff. And, you know, we just don't go anywhere. And that will lead ultimately to our destruction.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like things like astrology is not even a belief. So if anybody tries to tell you that, oh, you believe in that, like, what do you mean, do I believe in that? I don't believe it. It's the logging and the study of planetary cycles and patterns and everything. There's nothing to believe in. We know that happens. So it's not that I believe in it.
Right.
Do I believe that it has an effect, and statistically it is shown that certain occurrences happen during this time of this planet and its cycle or this pattern, and we see that repeats over history and over time and everything. We have enough time behind us and occurrences in our natural world to show that. That's where that comparative data comes from.
Right. And with me, like when people say, hey, do you believe in astrology? I tell them I don't believe in astrology any more than I would believe in chemistry or mathematics. It's something to know. Gio's right. And it's a tool to use when it can be applied sensibly. And with this study or studies, it was applied sensibly. And it was proven to have some sort of significance, more than just some significance, you know? And, you know, let's be honest. Let's go back to some of our religious comparisons. Even Christianity, which said in the Lord's Prayer, as it is done on earth, as it is in heaven, which is simply reflecting the fact that there is a connection between events down here and events up there. So the signs are all over the place. And, you know, we go through phases in our lives, and these phases can seem to correlate with the movements of the sun, the moon, and various planets. We could look at the slower rhythms, more so the outer planets, and we could see the relationship between these planetary cycles, us, and events in history. I think history is our biggest, as long as we know the correct history, which I'm pretty sure generally we do when it comes to little things. Maybe
not so everything, because of textbooks and society being so fucked up.
I think everyone can agree that after we heard the Christopher Columbus story, and then when you get older and you really think, like, you think they just marched on this land and was like, hey, you know,
go look at the Christopher
Columbus.
Want to be
roommates?
He was a fuck up. Italy didn't even want him.
He was
I'm
criminal.
Italian. I know a lot of Italians associate with Christopher Columbus. Screw that guy.
Hey, he's a criminal.
Yeah. They didn't even want him.
They kicked him out.
He betrayed his own people. Please get the hell out of here with that shit.
So, but we talk about events in history, and, you know, astrology doesn't affect only individual humans. The rise and fall of how their lives go. You know, the times in our lives where things seem to work easier or opposed to, say, times that are more difficult, which in study is obviously reflected on and proven. But the same effect is with the rise and fall of civilizations, just like individual humans. The process of old age and to go through old age and decay isn't subject to just people. We could follow these rhythms just like we follow the patterns in an individual's life. We can use astrology to measure a civilization, a country. It's called Mundane Astrology. It's where we look at the birth chart of something with that specific point. Like, for example, America was born July 4th, 1776. Now let's go look at that chart. We're a Cancer.
Yeah.
Remember what we said about moon signs?
Yeah.
We're sensitive.
Exactly.
Right? We seem to come off like a Cancer. We do.
And that that's funny because you said about the whole energy and like that beginning and ending and stuff like that. So when we're talking about that and we see how this has a lot to do with those wave patterns and energy and frequency, you can really see how the quality of energy from deep in the universe gives us the conditions that we see sometimes. It's all elemental. With the motion and property of energy being generation, like it starts up, it's conserved for a while, then it corrupts until finally it destructs. As we see in all life, our bodies go through the same process as do many things, even with celestial bodies. It's labeled with the elements in astrology as fire, earth, air, water. Fire being heat, that's the generative type of energy. Earth is the dryness, and that's the conservation. Air being cold, that's the corruption. And water, which is moist, that's the destruction.
And real quick, if you look at the chart of astrology starting from the beginning, Aries to Taurus to Gemini to Cancer, that fire, earth, air, and water.
Fire, earth, and it keeps repeating.
And it keeps going. Exactly. So it has that pattern.
So it shows that if you look at wave patterns in energy and stuff, how that movement of going up and then down, up and then down, up and then down.
Everything has that pattern.
So then the planets have their own motion and properties. So they are the corruption in the outward magnetic pulse in the universe, and they cause abrasion between magnetism, and that creates that generates that electricity and creates light and matter. And all energy can be traced back to having that property of generation, conservation, corruption, and destruction, because it always begins and then can end unless obstructed or conducted by another body or particle.
As we're a cycle of a planet.
Exactly. So therefore they interact and are connected together from the main center point of the first generational energy in our existence. And since they interact, they create new properties based in the relation of their movements when interacting with each other's vibrations. So obviously, if you go to Sciences of Our Universe, you can see how astronomy and astrology come in play and are scientific, because there's no doubt the planets and celestial bodies have been there before us. We have been able to calculate their movements, speed, motions, and qualities. So there's a long line of proven data to support that. And we are able to better detect this energy and its patterns and trace it back. So knowing how the planets energetically corrupt that center point of galactic energy, which is that magnetism, it lets us know what kind of energy flow and patterns are directed towards Earth and us and even other places beyond us.
Right. So now let's take that, right? And we've said that astrology or astrologers use these planets and these cycles with within rich mythologies, mythologies of symbols. And astrologers will see symbols that have meanings that have been attached to them by humans in many cultures throughout time. And interestingly, the symbols take on similar meanings in cultures that were very far apart. They had no apparent communication from each other and from time's distant past. So all of these images, however, carry over, and as the cultures and all that stuff carry on, I mean, it's very easy for word of mouth that, what was it, telephone, right? They play the game. It could be easily misconstrued. But when we go back to the basics, like let's say astrologers look at planet Mars and its rhythms. And we definitely know that it's how we define our territory, how we address conflict, how our ego takes individual situations. It's the god of war, right? So astrologers look at the planets relating to each other. The sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, with many comets or, other sub-important planets like Chiron and stuff. And An astrologer takes these as like the hands on a cosmic clock.
Yeah, you think about crossing patterns, like, so that's the same thing. So
Right. And so like these patterns now repeat, and we look at history and they show us the truth. They show us these things as events on Earth. And we will eventually go big into, like, we've already talked about the age of Aquarius, what's supposed to come with that. And we have some humongous transits coming, which are very important. So to understand this knowledge can help you really set yourself up in your own personal situation.
And the statistics will show also too, like if something occurs that is big and we could say is significant with a certain transit, we have enough science and statistics that we can use with data to realize that, okay, what are the chances that whatever just happened during this transit, what are the chances that it happened by random? And it'll probably be one of those, like another studies, that 5 million to 1, that 10 million to 1 chance.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I referred to a clock. When using a clock on the wall, we see the hands come back to the same places, and we know it's like the beginning of an hour. They say when two planets are in the same place, that's the beginning of their cycle. It's the beginning of the hour. It's a reboot. We're starting over on something. It's a brand new cycle. It's a brand new pattern. For example, when the sun and the moon are lined up, this is what we call a new moon. This happens once a month, or a moonth, because our calendar is astrological. Your whole calendar is basically, it's just based off astrology and the planets. But every planet pair has a rhythm of new moon, like the beginning of an hour of the clock, or a full moon, like half past the hour, which in astrology you would call an opposition. This rhythm repeats on a monthly basis. So the sun and the moon create a measurement in time that is called a month, but we on Earth look at the patterns and we divide them in half, and then in half again, and then in half again. So we start to realize our measurements of time and our measurements of everything come from natural occurrences. It comes from things that are already happening. We measure these things by that. Days, hours, minutes, seconds. So if we divide a month in half, you know what we get? I didn't know this until my research this past week. It's called a fortnight.
Huh.
Very ironic.
Yeah.
Although we don't really use that measurement much anymore. I think England still does.
Huh.
But at one time it was important. It was as important as a measurement of a month. So it's half a month. It's 2 weeks. So if we divide a fortnight in half, we get a week.
Huh.
All right. And then you can keep dividing and going by all by the same math. So whoever invented time didn't invent it. They found it.
It was there. They
was there.
Found a way to log it.
Yeah. Our calendar.
With their own interpretation of it.
Right. And where they get the symbols or the stories, I mean, that's still one of my asked questions, and I guarantee we'll come up with the answer.
Yeah, which there's definitely some answers to that and some origins of all that, but
Sure. Well, we explained like during the calendar that, certain times a year bring on certain characteristics, and throughout time they've observed these things in transits and have named them themselves.
Yeah,
I mean,
you even think the days of the week, how they're named after the planets and stuff, so it all goes along the line with that too as well.
Right. Monday, Moon Day, Saturday, Saturn Day.
Yep.
So
Martes.
Ooh.
Martes, Mars.
Right, Mars. Or Ram backwards.
I forget.
Ram.
Martes is what, Wednesday? In Spanish? I forget.
I want to say I think Wednesday's Mercury.
Luno.
The day of commerce.
Wait. Domingo, lunes, Martes. Oh, sorry. Martes is Tuesday. There
you go.
So Tuesday's
Monday,
Mars
Moon,
Day.
Tuesday, Mars Day. Wednesday is Mercury Day, day of commerce.
Yeah.
Thursday is Thor Day.
Because lunes is Monday, Martes, miércoles is Wednesday, and you just said Mercury.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow, there you go. See?
Yeah.
And then
Thursday.
Thor's Day. Which Thor is Jupiter in mythology, so it's Jupiter's day.
Yeah, but lunes, martes, miércoles, viernes.
That'd be Friday.
Oh yeah, Venus is that's Venus.
Yep,
that's right.
Friday's Venus Day. Saturn Day.
Why can I think what Thursday is in Spanish? Domingo, lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves. Jueves. There you go.
Or
Jupiter.
Jove.
Yeah,
Jove, because they also call Jupiter Jove.
Yeah, and you go back to the Spanish, you go back to the Latin, and it's very similar. That's why I'm doing it that way.
And do you see right on on recording here,
That's where we get our symbolism.
Right, but we're realizing these things. Like, that's something we've never talked about that before.
We actually haven't.
But when you know, like, languages and you know symbols and you know cultures, you start to realize it really does all connect, and it becomes so much fun, like, after you really get the basics down.
Yeah.
So our calendar proves to be astrological. Our naming of our calendar and these things, which, the Gregorian calendar, we're going to have to go into a big conversation about that. But, most of these things are in line with astrology.
Yeah,
all
that
of them
shit's
are,
funky. That whole
very funky.
calendar systems of the world and all that.
That damn Catholicism.
Yeah.
Roman Catholicism. All right, so so every planet and its pair, every planetary pair could be any pair. Like the two hands on a clock, like the hour hand and the minute hand, have a cycle of repetition where they come together like a new moon, and when they oppose like a half past the hour, like a full moon. Okay, so now if you want to further your studies into astrology and you study history and you start to realize that things repeat themselves statistically, now we can understand. And through science, we have quantum physics proving that everything's connected, everything's a big web of intelligence, everything's communicating to each other. And we start to learn, which, by the way, will be the next episode, of how we're like basically mini planets.
Yeah.
We're little earthlings, we're little earths. We're little electromagnetic fields doing the same thing to each other as the planets do to each other.
Yeah.
Because we walk around with an iron core, which is our heart and the blood pumping in it. And through that pulse, a measured electromagnetic field is present. Everything's electric, everything's magnetic. Everything has a cycle.
Think about it too, where even like little bacteria in a particle as well.
Sure.
We can affect the particle itself, just like bacteria does, and all other types of living organisms that may attach. Just something I was thinking.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, like, and cells in your body, they communicate through vibration.
Yeah.
They signal each other through vibrational. So everything's vibration. Everything communicates to each other. It doesn't matter the distance, because distance is nothing but an illusion. Quantum physics proves it. It's part of the weird part of quantum physics. So now where do we go? We say, well, astrology is basically proven. You have the statistics. You have the science. And there was a scientist. He was a buddy with Albert Einstein. He was a professor, physicist, and he was at Princeton University. I'm pretty sure he's still alive today, and was was alive in the time of Einstein. They studied the same information at the same time with the same books and the same data. This is what he said. We cannot even imagine a universe that did not contain observers like us, because the act of observing the universe makes the universe as it is. We are a part of the universe that is a work in progress that is incomplete. We are tiny patches of the universe looking at itself and building itself. This is a participatory universe. What we see and what we feel are one in the same. So it means we're not controlling the universe. We're not imposing our will upon the universe, but we're participating and co-creating with it. So how could we use these physics and these sciences like astrology to manifest our best life? And in the next episode, we'll go deeper into those ideas. That we affect the world through our thoughts, through our feelings, our observations, and in coordinates with the big clock in the sky.
Absolutely. Amen to that.
Right.
Amun.
Amun. Amen. Amun. Ra.
It's funny. I just one thing, and I was just thinking about when you were talking about the moon and stuff. Something I read in now in medieval astrology and even pre-medieval astrology, in order to be considered a doctor or a health physician or anything, you had to know astrology. That was a requirement. So the thing I was thinking of when you're talking about the moon and everything, so another thing is there's certain transits of the moon and also phases of the moon. And I'm not too sure, but I think it's like eclipses where they even say that you're not supposed to go get surgery because you're prone to mass bleeding. Now, we have mentioned about the moon. It affects the tides, right? You've talked about it. It affects the tides. The tides is water. What are we mostly made up of? Water, our blood. So you see right there, that's how
Right.
it just
Wow.
makes sense.
Yeah. Never thought of it like
I
that.
there was like I thought about it when you said the moon, and I'm like, oh shit. I
You
was
know,
like,
and now that you say that, right back at you, the menstrual cycle of a woman starts spilling blood everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, and that's at a specific point of the menstrual/moonstrual cycle of a
Yeah.
woman, which is every 28.5 days,
exactly.
just like the moon.
And
That's why.
what is that? A new moon phase? Or
Yeah. So there'd be like a new egg.
yeah.
And by the way, this is a Santos thing, but he had said the story of Humpty Dumpty, that little tune there, or whatever, that little story, is the story of the moon. The moon looks like an egg, and it sits on top, and it falls back over and cracks itself, and then it puts itself back together again.
Crap. Wow.
Yeah. And all the kings, whatever, and all
Yeah,
those
all the
men.
king's horsemen and all the
all the
king's
king's
men
men.
couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
There you go. And what's funny is, king, sun, so,
Yeah.
and all those horsemen, all the zodiacs, could be. But more so is like,
See how much there is to know? See how much there is to learn and how interesting it gets and how it could be just so mind-blowing. And then also how it can spark your own creative thought and intuition about things. And it makes you realize that, you're not just doomed for whatever goes on in your life.
Nope.
Like you have an active role in those things too. You are participating in the universe. Yeah, and like you said, you can't push free will. I mean, you can't push your own, complete will onto the earth and onto life in the universe. But you play an active role, and your own personal life is a very small role in a way, but it plays as a bigger role. So you could change those things in your own personal life.
right. Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And there was a good quote from a good old friend of mine who I'm actually not personally friends with, but I consider him in my head, Wayne Dyer. He once said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Mm-hmm.
And, and why is it important I'm going to add on to this. Why is it important to know astrology and the cosmic clock? Well, in the next episode, we're going to go through, how we affect the field of that quantum field through emotions and through thoughts and stuff like that. So we have this part of us where there's free will, and God gave us the ability to do things, or the universe gave us the ability to do things with free will. But if there's this big old blueprint, if there's this clock that's telling us what time it is in our lives, and we abide to this clock, this divine order that potentially could put us in better spots or make things a lot easier on us. Like, for example, let's say in a chart, it says it's a time where you're going to have to lose your job. It's going to be a reformation of your life. It's not time for love. It's not time for this, not time for that. And now, if you didn't know this, you're going to go through it and you're going to suffer. But if you know by the cosmic clock, the blueprint, that, it's not that time. It's not time for that. This is what I should be focused on, whether it's my traumas or my emotions or my family.
And you can see how psychologically that helps with that acceptance of being able to not play you're sitting there and accepting that this is just the time of it right now. And you have the faith that, the time is going to come. So therefore you're not sitting in your emotions playing the victim role. And we know what playing the victim role can do.
Right.
So yeah.
So this becomes like a tool now.
Gotta know how to read that clock.
Yes, it's very important. And you've had people like Hitler, which not a great person, but you had Hitler, you had Ronald Reagan. They both had astrologers. You had kings, you had queens, you have presidents, you have things. A lot of financial people use astrology. Yeah. I actually was funny. I was reading about Bitcoin and I was reading about all this other stuff, finance, because I'm starting to. And there was a whole article on the Uranus and Taurus transit and how Taurus rules money and Uranus rules change, at like sporadic change. And be on the lookout for that. And
what's that saying from what's his name?
J.P. Morgan.
Yeah.
Millionaires do not use astrology. The billionaires do.
Boom.
So, and you're talking about Chase Bank, J.P. Morgan, the guy who his bank's still alive. He was around, I think, the Great Depression. That guy started his venture. And was he a good person? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But he used astrology.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. No matter what, it depends. Also, how once you understand the timing of things, and also the how things, when they're extra charged or not charged, how you act and conduct yourself, that's on you though. So that's what I mean. It's not like you're doomed to some sort of fate or anything and stuff like that. Like, it's about the fact of how you're going to handle it.
Your
no matter
response.
what it's going to happen, what is your response? Are you going to react or are you going to respond?
Yeah. And here's another symbol, or here's like another metaphor of putting it. Now, we call the universe or one verse in a song, right?
Yeah.
And we have to go to the rhythm of the beat.
Mm-hmm.
And the notation of that song is in an astrology chart.
You get off beat, it becomes chaotic.
Right. Exactly. And also, if it is becoming chaotic and it's organized chaos, maybe that's what that saying "order out of chaos" means. With a lot of secret societies like to say otherwise.
Yeah.
But order out of chaos, where it looks like chaos. It's crazy out there. You got these spinning balls. We're on this planet flying 40,000 miles an hour into whatever, if it's round. And
that's it.
And which
asteroids flown, zooming, everything, things destructing,
chaos.
And things rebuilding.
It's what you said in the other episode. Being the bug on the dance floor, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. If you don't understand what's going on, and like you're just like an ant, and you walk out and you don't understand nothing on a stage during a Broadway show, you're gonna think like, "What the hell? I gotta get out of here. I'm gonna get stepped on."
But when you know the dance moves,
yeah, and you're like, "Oh, well, this is nice. It's a Shakespeare play. Okay, that's supposed to be playing. They're playing Romeo. She's playing Juliet. This is what's going on with them. This is the interaction they're having. I understand language. All that,
right?" So it makes it all make sense.
Exactly.
And there you go. I mean, that's how you'd apply. I mean, you can apply it. I know that when we were kids, the boy who cried wolf, and you had these certain stories that were supposed to teach you things. Well, that's kind of what we're doing here with astrology.
And that's sometimes how they're interpreted too, though, with other things. They're not necessarily spoken. They could be like the way we've gone into about the Bible. Like, they're not necessarily broken down in this way, but the same lessons are still there as well.
Always. So astrology is that and that only. It is the way to read the clock of the universe, to know what God or the universe has in store. And it's not that you are condemned to this life of, oh, well, then now I have to read it and follow it. No, you're a human. Yeah. You have free will. It's the paradox of it all, because life was nothing but a paradox. So you have the ability to go free will. I don't give a shit about the planets. I don't give a shit about anything. I'm going to go and riot and protest my red or blue, or, defend my beliefs and whatever. But all we're saying is it's kind of like we're giving you a little tip here on, well, if potentially you follow this, it could just better your life.
Yeah, it could be very grounding. That's the thing. Like, you don't have to necessarily be obsessive about it. You don't got to sit there and constantly, the astrology, I have to see what it says every single waking moment. Like, no, you don't have to do that.
No.
But there could be those certain times where, when you understand how astrology works, where you may be going through one of those phases or that difficulty in time, and you go back to read the astrology, and it helps you better maybe understand the cycle or pattern that you're going through. And therefore you kind of just like ground yourself, humble yourself, gain a certain perspective, gain acceptance, and are able to continue and move on and move forward.
And go with the rhythm.
Flow. And then also there's a time where you may feel supercharged and maybe like, oh my God, everything's going right. Like, let me look at the astrology. Let me see. Oh, well, I have this certain placement or whatever is going on, and it's during this cycle. So, this could be really activating. Let me not sleep on it.
Right.
And then it makes ambitious. Let me go forward, take action. It could be those times. It can be used any way.
And it becomes a lot more fun when you're actually watching it, and then you see things in your life. Like now, since I've been studying and learning, that I see transits in my own life, transits that are going on globally, and you're like, holy shit, it's actually happening in real time. I'm watching it, from back in August when the Leo King, David Palmer, he predicted the plague.
Yeah.
And he said it would be a plague that we've never seen before, and we wouldn't know if it was natural or not. And what has it been all year?
Exactly. Look at just all the theories on it.
And in line with the history of the 16 or 1800s, I think the 1600s.
Yeah, that. And there's a little bit also certain transits from, 1911 to 1918 as well.
Spanish flu.
Yeah, the Spanish flu.
Right.
There you go. And then also you get, he also talks about how the fact that like people dying not so much from the actual flu. I mean, there was a lot of deaths from the actual plague itself, but the fact that people were quarantining, and at the time, the way they heated up their homes and stuff was with those wood, what do you call those? The furnaces, and the furnaces are giving off all these burnt toxic, what do you call that? Like this, just carbon and all this stuff, and they're inhaling it, and that's how people are getting sick. They're not getting fresh air, they're not getting sunlight, natural vitamins. Then it's the cold in the winter. So, there's just something to look at there.
Yeah. And ironically too, you talk about that stuff being an issue. It's and I'm not here bringing up conspiracies like a nut job would, but I eventually want to really get into the science of what 5G can do, and how that's
going to be a good one.
Yeah, and how that's electromagnetic stuff, and that's frequency, and now if everything's frequency and vibration, and we all have electromagnetic fields, and that's sending frequencies through the ether, where we get Ethernet from. So if that's going on, what effect can that have on us? On a health standpoint. And if that's the case too, instead of the plague just killing everybody, what if something like 5G or how we are bathing in electromagnetic soups, what if that's having an effect on our health and we don't realize it? What if our depression and our inability to know who we are at a core level because we're trying to follow the herd and we're trying to do things according to the book that was given to us, what if that's killing you? What if that's killing your spirit? What if it is the fact that you're just not being yourself and you're not going after the things that you love and the things that you really are to your true self? What if that's destroying your spirit? And we all know that disease starts with that. It starts with the lowering of your vibration, the imbalance of your body. Because, disease can't exist in an alkaline body. Disease can't exist in a truly happy person. And if, let's say, a happy person does get a disease, that could be remnants of a past. There is things called DNA and all that. Yes, there's science to it all, but we can't ignore the fact that if our spirit is affected by these things, he had mentioned that a lot of people that had passed away for the plagues, that a lot of the people who didn't follow their destiny became depressed and didn't live.
Mm-hmm. Well, you think about too, there's also a lot of studies that show even how DNA can be altered by using the mind and heart-brain activity and all that. Yeah. So, which that'll be all stuff that we're going to get into. So that's why it's really great to highly recommend staying tuned to us, because as we go along, we're going to just go further and further and deeper into stuff, and we're just really going to put it out there.
Yeah. It's building blocks, and you'd be able to go to your favorite episodes or snoop around and maybe not have to understand every little thing we've talked about, but I highly recommend it. Yeah. I highly recommend sitting through the foundation of these things, and because we're climbing up a mountain right now.
Yeah, it could also activate your own creative mind, and you could even come up with your own thoughts and your own theories, and also maybe discover something that maybe we didn't talk about. And that's why we say we want to be in communication with everybody, and for people to reach out. We're all here to help each other.
Right. So. In an age where community is a thing.
Yeah.
They also do state that this will not be an age of guruism. Mm-hmm. It's not about, you are your own guru. You discover your own truth.
Yeah. I do believe the spiritual war thing too,
Sure.
The witch hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't believe that gematria.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh, if you guys know what gematria is, which eventually you will, gematria is the matching of numbers. It's Kabbalistic. It's Jewish. And words end up having similar, they add up to the same numbers that have in correlation with each other. And my name happened to match witch hunt, which, if you know statistically, is very rare to match a phrase or a saying like that, and almost complete. So I found that very interesting, that I've always been attracted to the occult and to discover the witches of the world in a sense. I've also dated a girl that claimed to be a witch. Found that out later on. Don't know if I'm still hexed, but I guess we'll
it's all right. I'm Italian. I give you the Moloch.
Yeah. All Italians know. Hey, dude,
I corne.
It's funny, all those little things that people do. They don't realize, like,
superstitions, all that.
Like, do you actually know what the middle finger came from?
Well, I heard about also
phallus. Like, fuck you. Like, my middle finger is my dick.
Well, I also heard too was the fact that what they used to, I forget if it was like the French, maybe during the French and Indian War or something like that. Maybe I could be wrong, but there was also a story about the fact that when their trigger finger, there was a trigger finger, I forget who it was. I think it was actually between the French and the British. I think it was Mr. Burns who actually taught me this. Yeah. And he was saying that what they used to do is they used to, they would, I think the British or one of them used to shoot with their middle fingers. That was their trigger finger. And then when they would capture them, they used to tie a wire around their fingers and pull it and basically cut off their fingers. So basically then when, let's just say for the story's sake, the French used to do that to the British. Mm-hmm. So then when the French used to pass by those prisoners, they stick up their middle fingers like, ha ha, I have my middle finger, you don't. Ah. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know. No, right. It could probably be added on. Right. Well, regardless.
Mr. Burns was a ball buster, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with history, a lot of the stuff is, you can always question it, but I believe, I can see that. That's not believable,
What do you know about the word shit?
No, I should. I feel like I do, but I definitely don't remember.
It's actually a good one. So back when they started, like, having steamboats, they were like coal operated and everything, so they had the furnaces.
Sure.
Well, the furnaces used to be not at the lowest level where they used to do to run the steamboat power and everything. And a big commodity was manure, when they used to transfer manure all the time. Now, manure is obviously crap and shit and stuff, but at the time, the word shit wasn't a word. So when they used to ship the shit, when they used to ship it out on these steamboats, they used to put it at the bottom of the boat. But the thing was, the manure would let off methane gas, and the methane gas would rise above into where the coal operating part of the steamboat would go, and it would blow up the ships. So when they would ship the manure, they started putting on the cargo crate boxes S.H.I.T, which stood for ship high in transport.
Wow.
Right? Fucking mind blown.
I don't know about you guys. That might be really fucking stupid to you. But that's fucking funny.
It.
That's fucking great.
That's funny and I love it.
But see, and like, just knowing I guarantee a lot of you didn't know that. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But see where it comes
Same
from.
Thing with the word fuck.
Yeah, it wasn't Shakespearean.
Fornication under Charles the King, and it had to do with the all prima nocta thing, where the king used to, deflower the bride. Fakakta, where the king used to deflower the bride when she got married before, and so that he could consent to the marriage and stuff. And it was fornication under Charles the King.
Fucking Chuck.
Right.
Fucking Chuck.
Fucking Chuck.
Fucking Chuck.
Charles.
I know, that's why I did that. I did that. That was on purpose.
It's so funny.
I'll take some credit for that.
We're going way off the radar here.
No, it doesn't matter. Yeah. I really think that it becomes fun. Yeah. And these are great. And, if you really want to involve it in the conversation, what we're saying is, see all the origins and where things come from.
All the symbolism.
You don't know where things come from unless you do some research. And please, stay the hell out of your history book.
Yeah. And be careful with Google.
Yeah, Jamie.
Yeah,
Jamie from Mr. Rogan.
Careful with the Google.
Yeah, that guy thinks he knows everything because of Google. Mm-hmm. I totally think that's fucking retarded.
Oops. And don't be getting your friggin' information from memes.
Yeah,
we're not 5.
Oh, I have a book on that, and basically saying like memes are like the new way that information's passed, and people are starting to build belief systems off of. Beliefs off of memes.
Memes are just supposed to be funny and to show also sometimes that like, holy shit, we all think I'm thinking something or I do something that I didn't know anybody else really does. Yeah. But a lot of people actually do. Sure. And you see it sometimes.
And it could pass. It could pass information. Just make sure you just don't go off a meme and say, oh, that's a fact. Yeah. Like, do your research always. I mean, we live in the age, there's no excuse anymore. You have the embodiment of the Akashic records, everything that was ever known to be known in your phone. And everyone has one now.
Yeah.
You got an iPhone. I don't care if you're homeless on the street, you probably have an iPhone.
Yeah. And when you do your research, you got to like check multiple different sources just because there's a lot of sources and even platforms as we're seeing nowadays with just between censorship and also the fact that, there's a lot of, things that are published on certain platforms when you're looking for information that go more so towards the narrative of something that's more beneficial for that platform or who that platform promotes. So you have to do a little bit more digging than just typing into a search bar.
Yeah, I would trust a lot more of books.
Yes.
To get book recommendations and to go into teachers and authors that really have good credibility, and not by mainstream credibility, but by other people that are learning in the topic. And, this isn't off topic because that brings up the whole...
Even astrology, proving it and all that, and proving it.
Yeah, it goes right. It goes back into that. Like those people had intentions, like certain individual intentions to gain something for themselves. And in Google, by the way, and you guys, this is a fact.
I think you should say it.
You guys should know this. That
hopefully I don't censor this. Call it G.
G. That I could, this is nothing in conspiracy. This is, so if I have a business or a website and I want to put it on the first page of Google, I just have to pay more than the next guy. That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
So if someone has some sort of agenda and they don't want you to know something, well, they just got to buy the first page.
Yeah.
They just got to put things on the first,
Yeah.
If they don't want you to know something, they're going to try. I don't know who they are.
Money
I
talks,
know who they are, but I don't know who they are.
Bullshit walks.
Right. So they will figure out in some one of these episodes. So don't be like, well, who they? What? There's this big old.
Yeah.
Let's not.
That's the thing. No matter what, just when you're looking, no matter what is politics, anything, research, always look at both biases. Because when you look at both biases, then you get to sit there, critically think, and take the information from the one side and information from the other side, and then compare, contrast, and develop your own type of opinion. But be careful of your opinion and your ego getting in the way, and then try to see and get the more factual stuff and see what actually adds up.
Yeah. So it actually does take a little bit of discernment and discipline to research, because you now have to suspend your things you know to be facts your whole life, and you have to drop them, and you have to go into these things without having any sort of personal intention of affecting or accumulating knowledge on that specific topic, which is what we do. And Gio, when we first started getting real close, he was big on religion. He still is. Yeah. But guess what? He was open-minded enough to realize, because there's a lot of Christians out there that say, oh, astrology.
Yeah, I have a hard time. I was just literally talking to my mom last night, and we were kind of going back and forth. And she's trying to argue with me, but I'm like, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that there's deeper stuff to look at. I no matter what, down to the core, I believe the same integrity that you do when it comes to everything. But you got to watch out for the disinformation as well that's hidden within certain organizations and all that, or certain things, and how things came to be, why they're written this way, whatever it is.
Yep.
And she didn't want to get that.
Well, it's sick and twisted, but humans can lie.
Yeah, and
humans can manipulate.
Yeah.
These are real known, these are real known.
It's in the Bible. It is,
to
but
me,
I mean, that is, though.
Is,
that lean not on your own understanding or the understanding of man and all that. Like, okay.
But there is a way to understand it. And the thing is I always have looked at people like that, not as bad people. They're not doing, they're not doing themselves justice, but I find it lazy. It's lazy to me, because you're not even giving something else a chance. Like if I told you from the beginning of time, 2 + 2 = 5, and your whole 8, 9, 10 years old, like, yeah, 2 + 2 = 5. And then I put on paper, well, actually it equals 4. Well, no, what I learned doesn't tell me that, and that's a very extreme example. But that's basically what it is. And it's one thing if we didn't have some good evidence here, but this is a big reason why we chose to do this podcast, because we do have evidence, and we just want to spark thought, and we just want to expand the minds, because it's going to lead to knowledge being our power.
Yeah, we got to sync up the minds of the world. Got to sync up the people.
Yeah, we got to not be so divided. Yeah. And we can come together and stuff like this. You can have your own depictions and your own names and stuff like that. That's fine. Yeah. But when it comes to the truth, you can only dress it so differently. It's only going to be so different, because at the end of the day, there are things that are in place that show that there is a mechanism, or say like a pattern, and it's really there. So that's, that sums it up. That sums up the whole point to this this podcast, but also this episode. And on the next episode, we're going to go into how our personal little planetary bodies, our little electromagnetic fields, our torus fields, our energy has an effect directly onto the etheric soup that surrounds us. So we affect ourselves, we affect our health, we affect other people, we affect animals, they affect us. This is a conversation we're constantly having with the electromagnetic field and soup that we live in.
Yeah, we give off our own magnetism and our own energy, and create our own auras too. That we're gonna, and that's what we're gonna get into.
All able to be measured, and we'll keep bringing the facts. And just like the planets, we send out vibrations and affect the world and things around us. And it gets a little interesting too next episode, because it's going to show how the magical M word, we manifest and we bring things to ourselves magnetically, and how we basically can change our lives and our world just by a simple change of attitude, change of thoughts and beliefs. And it's to better everybody listening and ourselves. And we're really, really excited to take that next step towards that. So
hell yeah. So stay with us. We appreciate you listening. As always, we just ask, if you want to support us, please do. You enjoy it, reach out to us. You have any recommendations, you know what to do. So always check out our Instagrams if you want to connect with us. And we'll go from there.
Yep. And we'll leave a link to all our social media.
Yeah.
We're potentially starting a Patreon or a GoFundMe, either way. And we'd appreciate any donations or any sort of help to get this off the ground more. We want to be a big old community. We want to eventually have people on.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a nice following, and to be able to see the interaction and the connection with everybody.
Right, and we're excited about that. So until next time, guys,